Hi guys, so this video is going to be the part 2 video of Unit 7. We're going to talk about colonial reforms. The previous video we talked about what happened in Colebrook reforms, so let's see what happened after that. So this lesson, this unit basically discusses about the national movement of Sri Lanka as well. In the previous syllabus there was a separate lesson called the national movement of Sri Lanka, where we discuss how during the colonial times that the national movement worked with the Ceylon National Congress and all these national heroes we have in our country. Now that lesson is not there anymore, so under colonial reforms, colonial transformations unit, we discuss about them as well. So we had a national movement in Sri Lanka. Despite being a colony, our national movement did not focus on gaining independence, right? So rather than that, our national movement pretty much focused on gaining political reforms, right? Now you guys remember under Colebrook reforms, they established a 15-member legislative council as well as an executive council. So our national movement leaders basically requested the British rulers to stay, not to leave, like for them to stay and allow them more powers and more responsibility in terms of governance. And whatever the reforms that were introduced after that, through McCallum, Manning, Devonshire, everything, they were results of those protests done by our national movement. Okay, so if we begin the lesson by examining so guys, in this council there were 37 members altogether. Out of that, 14 officials and 23 of them were unofficials, right? So what is important about this council is the fact that for the first time the council had a majority of unofficial members. There were 23 unofficials. However, the problem was that although this council had a majority of unofficial members, when you put the officials and the governors nominated unofficials, which means out of the unofficials, the governors nominated ones are favorable to the governor, right? So when you put the officials and the nominated members together, the governor still had a majority that favoring him. Okay, right. And another important fact is that when did these protests start? It was in 1860s. By 1860s, those 3 European planters, if you remember, there were 3 Europeans in the Legislative Council, and it was the Europeans who started these protests asking for more seats in the Legislative Council. Now the locals had some representation, one Sinhalese, one Tamil, one Muslim, but they weren't fully aware of the idea of a legislature and what can be done in a legislature and how important representation is. So because of that, the locals weren't very bothered in asking for more reforms. It was the European planters who started asking for more unofficial seats in the legislature, because there are only 6 unofficials versus 9 officials. They were like, we need more unofficials. And the protests by European planters weren't really addressed because the British colonizers didn't care much. So no reasonable amendment was done, other than the fact that they allowed 2 more unofficial members, one for upcountry Sinhalese and one for Muslims. So 15 became 17. Other than that, that was in like 1886, somewhere around that time. Nothing important happened. So by like the late 19th century, by like 1890s and all, this elite class we talked about elite class in the previous video, that because of the English education, that there were people who became educated and rich. So these elite class people, they went abroad for their higher studies. So they went abroad to the European universities and all these things, and they learned political science, and they saw how parliaments and stuff work in these countries. So when they looked back at the legislative council which existed in Ceylon, that had like 15 members, and 9 of them are unofficials, and only 6 of them are unofficials who are also being appointed by the governor himself, and the governor basically chairing the council and the governor dominating this council. They realize that they don't have much political rights. So our leaders established the Ceylon Reforms League. So the name explains that they are not fighting for independence, they are fighting for reforms. Ceylon Reforms League, and they started protesting for political reforms. Basically what they asked for was a dominion country, dominion status, with a Westminster executive format. So basically in like late 1890s, our leaders were requesting for the British rulers to grant them dominion status, with our own parliament and our own prime minister and a cabinet. Basically what we got in 1947, they were asking for that in like 1895. So these people were protesting for a while, and by like 1910, British rulers were finally ready to give us some political reforms. So what they gave was Crewe-McCallum reforms. So what were the important features of Crewe-McCallum reforms? First of all, that legislative council, which had 15 members according to Colebrook reforms, which were later expanded to 17, this was increased up to 21. So out of the 21, there were 11 officials and 10 unofficials. Out of the 10 unofficials, 6 of them were nominated by the governor, 4 of them were elected with limited franchise. This is important, which we will discuss in a bit, how important that was. Then out of the 6 nominated, 2 of them were lower country Sinhalese, 1 upcountry Sinhalese, 2 Tamils and 1 Muslim. Out of the 4 elected through limited franchise, 2 of them were Europeans, 1 person was Burgher, and 1 person was an educated Ceylonese. Right. Then however, you can see that still the British rulers assured that the majority of the house remained officials, 11 officials and 10 unofficials, right? So because of that, the British rulers still had a majority in the Legislative Council. Then secondly, another important thing was the introduction of limited franchise. So under this, elite class people, rich and educated adult males, were allowed to vote. Limited franchise means voting was allowed to people who have property and who are capable of writing, reading and speaking English, who have passed the senior college exam, and the males who are above the age of 21 were allowed to vote. So this is called the limited franchise or limited suffrage, and under this a very small percentage of the country were allowed to vote. So during this time, voting was not considered as a right, it was considered rather a privilege. Voting was a privilege. Okay. Then other than that, it also should be noted that this was considered as this can be considered as the peak point of communal representation in Sri Lanka. As you can see that the people were divided into ethnicities, like Sinhalese were divided as upcountry Sinhalese and lower country Sinhalese, and even the two upcountry Sinhalese were chosen from two castes. One was from Govigama, other one was from Karawa. Like Govigama means like the typical Sinhalese, like the Karunaratnas, Jayasuriyas, Vijayaratnas, those people, and other one from Karawa, which was like more towards the coastal sides, like the Fernandos, Pereiras, Silvas, the Portuguese descended Sinhalese. Other than that, the two Tamils were also chosen from two castes. One was chosen from Hindu Ellalas, while the other Tamil was a Tamil Christian. Other than that, the fact that there was one educated Ceylonese appointed, they sort of created a division between the locals as educated and uneducated. And the first educated Ceylonese to be elected to the Legislative Council was Ponnamulam Ramanathan. And the fact that being a Tamil, that he managed to defeat Sir Marcus Fernando, who was the Sinhala candidate for that position. Actually what happened behind the scenes in that case was the caste division, that the Govigama Sinhalese weren't willing to vote for him because he was a Karawa Sinhalese, because he was a Fernando, right? So when Tamil votes and Govigama Sinhala votes came together, that Ramanathan managed to defeat Sir Marcus Fernando. So this shows that the ethnic conflict we had and the divisions we had were sort of severe during this time, and the British people used the divide and conquer theory to the climactic point under under Crewe McCallum reforms. So we could see the clear consequences of this, as 5 years later in 1915 the first ethnic based conflict took place among two communities in Sri Lanka, as in Gampola we had the Sinhala Muslim conflict. So after this, when this conflict occurred, the British governor Robert Chalmers sort of misunderstood this as an attempt against the British rulers. So he arrested all these elite class people. Some of them were imprisoned. People like D.S. Senanayake, F.R. Senanayake, they were imprisoned. And one person, Henry Spredris, he was executed. So following this, the elite class people were quite heartbroken, given the fact that they have been favoring the British, and them receiving such a treatment from the British. They thought the reason behind that is the fact that they don't have enough political powers inside the system. So they were not satisfied with Crewe McCallum reforms, and they started protesting again. However, by this time the British rulers were fighting the First World War in Europe. So they were like, we will give you Manning reforms for now until we give a different reform later. So they gave us Manning reforms in 1920. So in these reforms a couple of important things happened. First of all, the legislature's number from 21, it was expanded to 37. Out of that, 14 officials and 23 of them were unofficials, right? So what is important about this council is the fact that for the first time the council had a majority of unofficial members. However, the problem was that although this council had a majority of unofficial members, when you put the officials and the governors nominated unofficials, which means out of the unofficials the governors nominated ones are favorable to the governor, right? So when you put the officials and the nominated members together, the governor still had a majority that favoring him. Okay, right. It is also important to notice that regional representation was introduced to Sri Lanka. However, communal representation was not completely taken off. Instead, they decided to use regional representation and communal representation together. So, under regional representation, Western Province was given 3 seats, 2 specifically for Colombo out of that, and each other province was given 1 seat. It is important to notice that this sort of created a conflict between the Tamil leaders and the Sinhalese leaders in the Ceylon National Congress. Basically what happened was, by this time Tamil people had 2 frontline leaders, the Ramanathan brothers, Ponnambalam brothers, Ponnambalam Ramanathan and Ponnambalam Arunachalam, and these 2 could not contest to the seat that was allocated to Northern Province, because if you want to contest for a regional seat, you have to be a resident in that area for the past 2 years. And since Ponnambalam brothers lived in Colombo, they could not contest to the Northern Province seat. So because of that, they planned on contesting to these 2 seats in Colombo, and they requested the Sinhalese leaders not to contest in these 2 seats, because if the Sinhalese representatives contest, then Tamil people can't win, because the majority of the citizens are in Colombo are Sinhalese, right? So the Sinhalese leaders agreed not to contest, but at the day of the election, they gave nominations to those 2 seats as well. This, as a result of this, the Ponnambalam Ramanathan and Ponnambalam Arunachalam, those 2 brothers, could not win a seat in the legislature, and the 2 frontline leaders of the Tamil people were left out of the Legislative Council. This created a dispute between the Sinhalese and the Tamils, where the Tamil leaders decided to walk out of the Ceylon National Congress to form the Tamil Congress. Right. Then in 1924, Manning Devonshire reforms were introduced to Sri Lanka. Now, ideally speaking, this was the reform that was supposed to be given. Now, Manning reforms were sort of like a temporary thing, and in 1924 they introduced Manning Devonshire reforms. Under this, a legislative council was suggested, which had 49 seats, and out of that only 12 of them were British officials. 37 of the members were unofficials. Out of the 37 also, only 8 of them were nominated by the governor. 29 of the members were elected through limited franchise. So for the first time, we had a elected members majority in the Legislative Council in the 1924 Manning Devonshire reforms. The other important thing to notice is the fact that the Legislative Council had always been chaired by the governor himself. The governor himself chaired the Legislative Council since 1833 until 1924. So Manning Devonshire reforms changed that. Basically, the British people did not want the governor holding the chair of a house that had a majority of elected members, because they are not controlled by the governor. So they thought it's not good for the governor's reputation. If these people disobey the governor in the council, it's not good for his reputation. Because of that, the governor was kept aside, and they chose a chairman. In Manning Devonshire reforms to chair the Legislative Council. A chairman was chosen within. So this was like a transitional period, because from 1833 to 1924 the Legislative Council was chaired by the governor. After 1931, since Donamo the legislature was always chaired by a speaker. Up to date, the speaker chairs it. So for these 7 years, from 1924 to 1931, under Manning Devonshire, a chairman chaired the legislative council, which is like a transitional period from the chairman to the governor. Sorry, the chairman to the speaker. Okay, right. And the other important thing about this legislative council was the fact that this council separated power and responsibility, which means now that this council has a majority of elected officials, they pretty much handle the power inside the legislative council. However, the British governor was still responsible to the British Queen regarding what happened in Ceylon. So because of that, we see this as a weakness in the 1924 Manning Devonshire legislature, because it separated, more like disconnected. Disconnected would be the right word. They disconnected power and responsibility, which is considered as a weakness, because the power was within the elected members, elected local members, unofficials, while the responsibility was with the governor, because the governor was responsible to the British throne regarding what happened in Ceylon. So because of that, the governor was sort of fed up by the late years of Manning Devonshire reforms. Now all this time, whenever reform was given to Ceylon, it was the local community, the local leaders, those requested for a new reform. That who said that we are not happy with that, we need a new reform. It was said by the local leaders. But for the first time, under Manning Devonshire reforms, the governor sort of had enough of this disconnection of power and responsibility. Because of that, the governor himself requested the British rulers for a new constitutional reform. So as a result of that, by 1931, the Donovo Commission was sent to Ceylon, and the Donovo Commission introduced Donovo reforms, which was a drastic difference, a drastic change from all the other reforms that were introduced to Ceylon all this time. So in the next video, we'll talk about Donovo reforms.